The video was 47 seconds long. I watched it twice. My brother Derek looked directly into the camera, his chin tilted up in that smug way he had perfected since childhood, and said the words I would never forget. She owes us. He was smiling. My mother nodded from the couch behind him, her hands folded in her lap like a queen approving a court jester. My father stood in the doorway of the kitchen, half out of frame, saying nothing. That was his role. Always. I did not scream. I did not cry. I set my phone face down on the desk beside my keyboard and noticed the way the timestamp on the message read 9:47 in the morning. Laura had meant to forward it to the family group chat. She sent it to me by mistake. I am Claire Harrison, and at 42 years old, I managed a portfolio of rental properties valued at $14 million. I had been paying the rent on that cramped little house they were sitting in for 3 years. $86,400. And they thought I was the failure. I saved the file. I said nothing. I made a plan. Tell me what city you are listening from, because I need to know that there are other people in the world who have sat alone in a room and realized that the people who should love them most have built their comfort on a foundation of contempt. I want you to imagine standing in a kitchen that has never once felt like yours, holding a grocery bag that your hands have carried for hours, and watching your mother glance at the clock as if to say you are early, you are late, you are never quite right. If you have ever sat in a room where your own blood treated you like an inconvenient stranger, if you have ever been the one who paid the bills and received nothing but silence in return, if you have ever understood that the word family is a lease agreement no one bothered to read, then this story is for you. I am going to tell you exactly what happened, and I am going to tell it the way I lived it, which means I will not spare myself and I will not spare them. If the story resonates, I ask you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear that silence is not submission and patience is not weakness. Now, let me take you back to how this nightmare started. The house was on Sycamore Drive in a neighborhood that had been respectable in the 1980s and had been declining ever since. The paint was the color of oatmeal that had sat too long in the bowl, and the front steps listed slightly to the left, as if the whole structure had given up on geometry. I rented it for them in early June, 3 years before the video arrived in my DMs. I had signed the master lease myself, through a holding company I had registered in the county under the name Harrison Properties LLC, because even then, even before I knew what they really thought of me, I understood that I needed layers between their chaos and my peace. The landlord of record on the paper they saw was a corporate entity. They never asked who owned it. They never asked anything about the money. They simply accepted that the rent appeared in the landlord's account on the first of every month, and they assumed it came from somewhere indefinite, like weather or gravity or the state. My home office was nothing like Sycamore Drive. It was a room I had designed myself, on the second floor of a condominium I had purchased outright at 37. The walls were a soft cream, the desk was a single slab of walnut on black iron legs, and the only decoration was a single white orchid on the corner of the filing cabinet. I kept the blinds open to the eastern light, and the morning sun fell across the surface of my desk in a clean rectangle, precise as a spreadsheet. I wore a white blouse and a tailored navy blazer most days, even when I had no meetings, because I had learned early that the way you dress for yourself is the way you prepare for the world. My hair was pulled back in a sleek low ponytail. My earrings were small gold studs, the same pair my grandmother Alina had given me when I turned 16, 3 years before she died. She was the only one who ever saw me clearly. She used to say, blood is thicker than water, but accountancy is thicker than blood. I did not understand what she meant until I was old enough to read a balance sheet and realize that love and obligation are not the same thing, but they can look identical from a distance. The family dynamics were not complicated, which made them harder to bear. There was no mystery, no hidden resentment that I had to excavate through therapy. They were simply a system, and I was the outermost satellite, useful for the gravitational pull I provided but never invited into the atmosphere. My mother Patricia was the architect, the one who designed the temperature of every room. She was 71 years old, silver-haired, and dressed in the kind of neutral tones that suggested she was above drama while actively orchestrating it. Her verbal tick was a question that was never a question. What will people think? She would say, and everyone in the room knew that the correct answer was whatever she had already decided. She said it when I told her I was buying my own condominium instead of renting an apartment like a normal person. She said it when my grandmother left me a small inheritance and I invested it in real estate instead of spending it on something visible. She said it when I declined to co-sign a car loan for Derek and his wife because my credit was better. What will people think, Claire? As if the crowd in her head was the highest authority in the universe. My father, Robert, was the enforcer, but not in the way that word usually suggests. He enforced by absence. He was a tall man who had gone soft around the middle, with a gentle voice and a habit of standing in doorways, half in and half out of every room, never fully committing to anything that required him to take a side. His verbal tick was a deflection dressed as mediation. Your mother means well, he would say, and I would look at him and wonder if he actually believed that, or if he had just said it so many times that the words had worn smooth and lost their meaning. He had been a high school history teacher before he retired, and he had the demeanor of a man who had spent 40 years telling teenagers to settle down and had never quite mustered the energy to apply the instruction to himself. He enabled my mother not because he agreed with her, but because disagreeing would have required a conversation, and conversations required a door he would have to walk through all the way. Derek was the beneficiary, the golden child at 40 years old who had never quite grown into the title. He was 2 years younger than me, still handsome in an unearned way, with the broad shoulders of a former high school athlete and the soft hands of a man who had never been required to carry anything heavier than his own expectations. His verbal tick was a shrug in sentence form. It's just how it is, he would say, as if the universe had personally ordained his comfort and my obligation. He worked as a sales associate at a furniture store in the strip mall near the interstate, a job he had held for 11 years without a promotion, and he lived in the house on Sycamore Drive with his wife and 2 children and my parents, all of them sheltering under the roof that I was paying for. He had never asked me for help directly. He did not need to. My mother handled all the negotiations. The ally in the family was the one they underestimated. Laura Mitchell was my first cousin, my mother's sister's daughter, and the family considered her a ditzy gossip who could not be trusted with serious information. She talked too much, they said. She forwarded things without checking the recipient. She was unreliable and scatterbrained and not quite sharp enough to include in the important conversations. They were wrong about her the way they were wrong about everything. Laura was a licensed paralegal specializing in real estate title searches and document retrieval, and she had been quietly helping me research the ownership chain on the Sycamore Drive property for months before the video ever arrived. She knew exactly what she was doing when she forwarded that file. She knew I would see it. She knew I would understand. I met Michael Chen at a commercial real estate conference in Chicago 3 years before the house on Sycamore Drive entered my life. He was a real estate attorney with an office in the financial district, and he had the kind of quiet precision that I recognized as competence because it mirrored my own. We had lunch once, then twice, then I became a client, and over the years he became something closer to a partner in the legal sense and something closer to a friend in the practical sense. He never asked why I wanted to structure my holdings through shell entities and holding companies. He just reviewed the documents, verified the deeds, and made sure everything was airtight. When I told him I wanted to lease a property to my family through an LLC that they would never connect to me, he raised one eyebrow, reviewed the legal implications, and then said, "You understand that this creates a landlord-tenant relationship with all the rights and obligations that entails." I said I understood. He prepared the master lease agreement, and I signed it, and the holding company signed it, and the family signed the sublease that they thought was the main lease, and none of them ever read the fine print because none of them ever read anything carefully. The first forensic object surfaced 3 months after they moved in. I had set up automatic transfers from my personal account to the property management account, $2,400 on the first of every month, and I had instructed the property manager to deposit the rent from the LLC account as if it came from a separate tenant. It was a shell game, but it was a legal one. The certified check from the family's attorney arrived in the mail on a Tuesday in September, 3 years before the video. It was for $86,400, and it was offered to me to sign over my interest in my grandmother's estate. I stared at the number for a long time. It was exactly the amount I had paid in rent over 3 years. Exactly. The mirror was so precise that I felt a cold bloom of understanding open in my chest. They had calculated what they thought my inheritance was worth, and they had offered me the exact sum they believed would buy me off, and they had no idea that I had already spent more than that keeping a roof over their heads. I did not cash the check. I filed it in a folder labeled estate, and I kept it as evidence of what they thought I was worth. The second forensic object was the master lease agreement that Michael had prepared. I kept a copy in a black binder on the second shelf of my filing cabinet, behind a set of property closing documents that no one would ever think to open. The lease was standard in most respects, but it contained 2 clauses that mattered. The first was an automatic renewal clause, which meant that the lease continued on a month to month basis after the initial term unless either party gave 30 days written notice. The second was a non payment clause, which stated that failure to pay rent within 10 days of the due date triggered an immediate eviction notice with no right to cure. Michael had written it exactly to my specifications. I had never used it. I had never needed to. I had paid every single month on time, often early, always without a note or a call or any acknowledgement that I was the one providing the shelter they took for granted. The third forensic object was the video itself. I saved it to a folder on my desktop labeled personal, which was a lie because nothing about it was personal in the way that word suggests. It was evidence. I watched it a third time, then a fourth, and each time I noticed something new. The way my mother adjusted her blouse before the camera started rolling, as if she was preparing for a performance. The way my father shifted his weight from one foot to the other in the doorway, never quite entering the frame, never quite leaving it. The way Derek's wife laughed from off screen, a high nervous sound that was meant to signal agreement but actually signaled complicity. The way Derek said, "She owes us," with the confidence of a man who had never been required to account for a single dollar in his life. I want to tell you about the world before the video, because the world before is what made the world after possible. I had been excluded from family gatherings for years, not explicitly but effectively. I would receive the invitation to Thanksgiving dinner 3 days before the event, as if I was an afterthought. I would arrive to find that the seating had been arranged, and my place was at the card table in the corner, the one with the wobbly leg that had to be propped with a folded napkin. I would bring a dish that nobody acknowledged, and I would leave early, and nobody would ask me to stay. I was the one who remembered birthdays but never received a card in return. I was the one who visited my father in the hospital after his gallbladder surgery and found that Derek had already left, that my mother had gone home to rest, that the nurses assumed I was a neighbor because no one had told them I had a daughter. I was the one who sent flowers for my mother's 70th birthday and received a text message that said thanks with no punctuation, as if even the period was too much effort. The worst part was not the exclusion. The worst part was that I had accepted it. I had normalized it. I had told myself that this was just how families worked, that some people were close and some people were distant, that I was the distant one because I had chosen a career over proximity and independence over dependence. I had believed my own rationalizations because the alternative was too painful to hold in my hands. The alternative was that they did not love me, that they had never loved me, that I was useful to them only as a source of money and convenience, and the quiet assumption that I would always show up when called. The morning the video arrived, I had been working on a portfolio review for a new acquisition, a 12-unit apartment building in the north part of the city that I was evaluating for a client. The numbers were clean, the cap rate was solid, and I had been in the middle of calculating the projected cash flow when my phone buzzed with the Instagram notification. I picked it up expecting a message from a contractor, or a tenant, or maybe Laura asking about a title search. Instead, I saw a video thumbnail that showed my living room. My living room, the one I was paying for. The one where my mother had arranged the furniture exactly the way she wanted, where my father's recliner sat in the corner facing the television, where Derek's children had drawn on the walls in crayon, and I had paid for the repainting without being asked. I opened the message. The video loaded. The frame held for a moment on the ceiling fan, which had a broken pull chain that I had offered to replace 3 times, and then the camera swung down to Derek's face. He was holding his phone at arm's length, filming himself, and behind him, I could see my mother settling into the couch cushions with the satisfied air of a woman who knew she was about to be entertained. All right, Derek said, grinning. Let me say something real for a second. Everyone always talks about Claire like she's some kind of success story, right? Like she's up there in her fancy condo with her big important job, managing all these properties. But let's be honest, guys, she's a loser. He laughed, my mother laughed, my father said nothing. She's 42 years old, she's never been married, she doesn't have kids, she just sits in that office all day staring at spreadsheets. And she thinks she's better than us because she has a little money. But here's the thing, she should be grateful. She should be grateful that we let her help. She owes us. After everything we did for her growing up, she owes us, and she knows it. My mother nodded. She does, she said, her voice calm and cert. She really does. She's not even that smart, Derek continued. She just got lucky with Grandma's money. If I had gotten that inheritance, I would have done 10 times more with it. But Grandma always played favorites. You know how it was. My father finally spoke from the doorway. Your mother means well, he said, and I realized he was defending me in his way or at least trying to, but the words came out as empty as they always did. She owes us, Derek repeated, and he smiled directly into the camera and the video ended. I set the phone down. I looked at the screen for a long moment. The sun was still falling across my desk in that clean rectangle of light. The orchid was still white and still alive. The numbers on my portfolio review were still correct. Nothing in the room had changed. Everything in the room had changed. I did not confront them. I did not call my mother. I did not text Derek. I did not send a furious message to my father asking him why he always stood in doorways instead of walking through them. I saved the video file to my desktop. I opened a new folder and labeled it with today's date. I pulled the black binder from the filing cabinet, and I read the master lease agreement from beginning to end, even though I already knew every clause by heart. I called Michael Chen, and I asked him to meet me at his office the following morning. He said yes without asking any questions. The fracture was not the video itself. The fracture was the realization that I had been paying for my own dehumanization. I had been funding the roof under which they gathered to mock me. I had been signing the checks that purchased the air they breathed while they laughed at my loneliness. I had been the invisible provider for a family that saw me as a mark, a source, a utility, a wallet with legs, and I had done it willingly. I had done it because I believed that generosity would eventually be recognized, that love would eventually be returned, that the people who shared my blood would eventually see me as more than a monthly transfer. They did not see me. They saw a loser. They saw someone who owed them. They saw a woman so desperate for belonging that she would pay for the privilege of being mocked. I did not cry. I did not break anything. I opened my laptop and I reviewed the portfolio for the 12-unit building and I made a note about the cap rate and I scheduled a walkthrough for the following week. And then I opened a new document and I began to write down everything I knew. The dates, the amounts, the messages, the video, the lease, the check, the deed, the names of the shell companies. The name of the holding company that held the master lease on Sycamore Drive. The name of the landlord of record, which was a corporate entity that traced back to me through layers so carefully constructed that even a forensic accountant would need a week to untangle them. I wrote for 2 hours. When I was finished, I saved the document, encrypted it, and closed my laptop. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I stood at the window and watched the city lights begin to blink on in the buildings across the street. I thought about my grandmother, about the way she had looked at me the last time I saw her, about the way she had said, "Blood is thicker than water, but accountancy is thicker than blood." I thought about the check for $86,400 sitting in the folder in my filing cabinet, the exact mirror of what I had spent. I thought about the master lease agreement with its non-payment clause, and its automatic renewal, and its 30-day eviction notice. I thought about what would happen if I simply stopped paying. I thought about what would happen if I stopped being grateful for the privilege of being their servant. I thought about what would happen if I stopped being a loser and started being a landlord. The next payment was due on the first of the month. That was 12 days away. I had already transferred the funds into the property management account, as I always did, as I had done for 36 consecutive months. But the transfer was not final until I approved it. I had set up the system myself, and I knew exactly where the kill switch was. I walked back to my desk. I opened my laptop. I looked at the pending transfer for $2,400, the same amount I had sent every month for 3 years, the same amount that had purchased the couch my mother sat on while she nodded along to her son calling me a loser. My finger hovered over the mouse. I did not click. I closed the laptop. 12 days. Plenty of time to let the silence do its work. The next morning, I drove to Michael Chen's office in the financial district. The building was glass and steel, clean lines, the kind of architecture that communicated stability without warmth. Michael was at his desk when I arrived, a cup of black coffee in his hand, his tie perfectly knotted, his glasses pushed up on his head in the way that meant he was deep in concentration. He looked up when I walked in, and he must have seen something in my face because he set down the coffee and said, "What happened?" I sat down in the chair across from his desk. I pulled out my phone. I played him the video. He watched the entire 47 seconds without moving. When it was over, he set the phone on the desk between us and said, "Tell me what you want to do." "I want to stop paying." He nodded slowly. "And then?" "I want to enforce the lease." "And then?" I looked at him. "I want them to understand that the person they mocked is the person who holds the deed." Michael leaned back in his chair. He picked up his coffee, took a sip, set it down. "You have the legal standing," he said. "The master lease is verified. The deed is recorded. The holding company is airtight. If you stop paying, the non-payment clause triggers automatically. You can serve a 30-day eviction notice on the first of the month following the missed payment." "Can I accelerate it?" He shook his head. 30 days is the floor, but you can make it clear that there will be no extensions, no exceptions, no forgiveness. That's exactly what I want. He studied me for a long moment. You understand that this will end your relationship with them. I understand that the relationship ended the moment Derek smiled into that camera and said I owed him something. I just didn't know it yet. Michael opened his drawer and pulled out a folder. He flipped it open and slid a document across the desk. It was the master lease agreement, the original, the one he had prepared 3 years ago. You signed this, he said. You own the property through the holding company. You are the landlord of record, you have every legal right to enforce the terms. I took the document, I read the non-payment clause again, even though I already knew it by heart. On the first of the month, I said, I stopped paying. And what do you want me to do? I want you to be present when I tell them. He nodded once, a small, precise motion. I'll be there. I drove home through the mid-morning traffic, the city sprawling around me in all its indifferent beauty. I thought about the house on Sycamore Drive, about the cracked front steps and the oatmeal-colored paint and the ceiling fan with the broken pull chain. I thought about my mother arranging the throw pillows exactly the way she wanted them in a house she did not own. I thought about my father standing in doorways. I thought about Derek's smile. I thought about the folder on my desktop labeled with today's date and the document inside it that contained every detail of the financial arrangement I had maintained for 3 years. I thought about the certified check for $86,400, the mirror value, the exact number that they thought would buy me off. I thought about the master lease agreement and the non-payment clause and the 30 days that would follow. I thought about the first of the month, 12 days away, when the payment would not arrive. And for the first time in 3 years, I smiled. The first of the month arrived like a verdict. I woke at 6 in the morning, as I always did, and I stood at the window of my condo with a cup of black coffee and watched the city stir to life. The pending transfer was still sitting in my banking portal, waiting for my approval, exactly as I had left it 12 days earlier. I had not touched it. I had not canceled it. I had simply let it sit, dormant and patient, like a line of code waiting for a command that would never come. At 7 in the morning, the automatic window for approval closed. The system timed out. The transfer did not process. $2,400 remained in my account. I did not feel relief. I did not feel guilt. I felt the clean, cold satisfaction of a promise kept to myself. The calls started at 9:15. My mother was first. Her name appeared on my screen with the photo I had taken of her 3 years ago at a Sunday brunch, the one where she was smiling at something my father had said, the one where she looked almost warm. I let it ring. I watched the screen until it went dark. She did not leave a voicemail. She called again at 9:22, then at 9:37. Then she stopped. My father called at 10:04. His voice when the voicemail finally recorded was tight and strained, the voice of a man who had been sent to deliver a message he did not want to carry. Claire, it's your father. Your mother says the rent didn't go through. Something must be wrong with the bank. Can you give us a call? I deleted the message without responding. Derek called at 11:30. He did not leave a voicemail. He sent a text message instead. It said, Did you forget to pay the rent? Mom is freaking out. I did not reply. The silence stretched through the afternoon. I worked on the 12-unit acquisition. I reviewed the inspection reports. I made notes on the cap rate. I did not look at my phone. At 4 in the afternoon, the family group chat exploded. My mother wrote, Claire, this is not funny. The landlord is going to charge us a late fee. Call me immediately. Derek wrote, Seriously, what is wrong with you? My father wrote, Let's all just calm down. I'm sure there's an explanation. My mother replied, The explanation is that she forgot. She's always forgetting things. It's like she doesn't even think about us. I watched the messages scroll by like a play I had already seen, the same roles, the same lines, the same predictable choreography of blame and deflection. I did not respond. I waited until 7 in the evening, when the day had faded into the soft blue of twilight, and then I typed a single message to the group chat. I want to meet Saturday at 2 in the afternoon at the house. We need to talk about the rent. I sent it. I locked my phone. I did not read the replies. Saturday arrived with the kind of gray, indifferent sky that promised no weather at all, just a flat ceiling of cloud that made everything look muted and patient. I dressed in my usual uniform, a white silk blouse, a tailored navy blazer, black trousers, low heels. My hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, clean and precise. I put in the small gold stud earrings my grandmother had given me. I did not put on makeup beyond a thin layer of foundation and the bold cherry red lipstick that had become my signature, the one color I allowed myself, the one statement I made without words. I took the folder from my filing cabinet. It contained the master lease agreement, the property deed, the certified check for $86,400 that they had sent me 3 years ago, and a single printed sheet of paper with the exact dates and amounts of every rent payment I had made for 36 consecutive months. I drove to Sycamore Drive in silence. No music, no podcast, just the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. The house looked the same as it always did. The oatmeal-colored paint was peeling in the corner near the gutter. front steps still listed to the left. The screen door had a tear in the mesh that I had offered to replace twice. I had not been inside the house in over a year. I had sent the money and stayed away, telling myself that distance was protection, that my presence would only complicate the arrangement, that they needed space to live their lives without me hovering over them like a landlord counting every penny. But I was a landlord. I had always been a landlord. I had just refused to use the word. I parked at the curb and sat in the car for a full minute, looking at the house, at the way the curtains in the front window had been replaced with something floral and yellow, at the way a child's tricycle lay on its side in the patchy grass of the front yard. This was the house I had paid for. This was the stage on which they had performed their contempt. I opened the car door and stepped out. The front door was unlocked. I let myself in, the way I used to when I was still welcome, before the distance had become a wall instead of a door. The living room was exactly as it had appeared in the video. The couch was the same beige sectional I had helped my mother pick out 3 years ago, the one she had insisted on even though I had warned her that beige showed every stain. The recliner in the corner was my father's, worn and sagging in the seat cushion. The ceiling fan with the broken pull chain spun slowly, uselessly, the chain hanging like a question mark. The television was mounted on the wall above a cheap entertainment center, and on the coffee table sat a ceramic bowl of pretzels and a stack of coasters that no one ever used. The room smelled like my mother's candle, vanilla and cinnamon, the same scent she had burned in every house I had ever lived in with her. I did not sit. I stood near the entrance to the dining room, the folder held against my chest with both hands, and I waited. I heard footsteps from the kitchen, then the murmur of voices, then the creak of the back door opening. The family began to assemble. My mother came first, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her silver hair perfectly curled, her blouse a crisp lavender that I had never seen before, probably bought for this occasion, the performance of respectability. She looked at me with an expression I knew intimately, the one that said she was disappointed before I had even spoken, the one that said I had already failed whatever test she had set. "There you are," she said. Her voice was light, almost musical, as if she was greeting a guest at a party. We were starting to worry. I said nothing. I simply nodded. My father emerged from the kitchen behind her, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders hunched in that permanent posture of apology. "Claire," he said, and he smiled a small, uncertain smile that was meant to disarm, but only revealed his discomfort. "Good to see you." Derek came down the hallway from the bedrooms, his footsteps heavy on the old hardwood. He was wearing a polo shirt and jeans, his version of dressed up, and his face was set in the expression of a man who had already decided that he was the aggrieved party. He did not smile. He walked past his mother and stood in the center of the living room, his arms crossed, his chin tilted up in that exact angle I had seen in the video. "So," he said, "are you going to explain why you didn't pay the rent?" I looked at him. I looked at my mother, who had folded the dish towel and placed it on the arm of the couch. I looked at my father, who had found his usual spot in the doorway of the kitchen, half in and half out. The room was warm, almost stuffy, but I felt no heat. I felt the cold precision of a plan that had been waiting for this moment. "I didn't pay the rent," I said, "because I am the landlord." The words hung in the air like a note held too long. My mother's face went through a series of micro-expressions that I catalogued with clinical interest. Confusion first, then dismissal, then a flicker of something that might have been fear before she smoothed it away. My father's hand stopped moving in his pockets. Derek's arms uncrossed and crossed again, tighter this time. "What are you talking about?" Derek said. "The landlord is some company, Harrison Properties. We signed the lease with them." "You signed a sublease," I said. "The master lease is held by Harrison Properties LLC, which is a holding company I registered 3 years ago. I own the property. I hold the deed. I have been the landlord of this house since the day you moved in." My mother laughed. It was a short, brittle sound like glass breaking. "That's ridiculous," she said. "You're a property manager. You don't own houses." "I manage a $14 million portfolio of rental properties," I said. "I have owned this specific property for 3 years. The deed is recorded in the county clerk's office. I have a copy in this folder, along with the master lease agreement that you all signed without reading the fine print." I opened the folder and pulled out the documents. I held them up one at a time: the deed, the lease, the payment history, the certified check they had sent me, the mirror value of every dollar I had spent on them. I did not hand them over. I simply displayed them like evidence in a trial I had already won. My father stepped out of the doorway finally, fully into the room. "Claire," he said, his voice low and careful, "is this true?" "It's entirely true," I said, "and the lease contains a non-payment clause. Failure to pay rent within 10 days of the due date triggers an immediate eviction notice with no right to cure. The due date was the 1st of the month. Today is the 3rd. You have 7 days remaining." "You wouldn't evict us," my mother said. Her voice had lost its musical quality. It was flat now hard, the voice of a woman who was used to getting what she wanted through sheer force of expectation. We're your family. What will people think? I don't care what people think, I said. I care about what I know. And I know that you have been living in a house I paid for, eating food I made possible, breathing air I financed, while you sat in this living room and called me a loser. Derek's face flushed. You saw that video. Your wife forwarded it to me, I said. Laura meant to send it to the family chat. She sent it to me instead. I watched the entire 47 seconds. I watched you smile and say that I owed you. I watched our mother nod along. I watched our father stand in the doorway and say nothing, as always. My mother's eyes went narrow. Laura sent it to you? That girl was always trouble. She can't keep anything straight. Laura is the reason I know exactly what you think of me, I said. And she is also a licensed paralegal who helped me verify the title chain on this property. She has been working with me for months. My father's face had gone pale. He sat down heavily on the arm of the couch as if his legs had given out. Claire, we didn't mean it the way it sounded. It was just family talk, just joking around. $75,000 is not a joke, I said. $86,400 over 3 years is not a joke. And you sent me a check for exactly that amount, trying to buy off my inheritance from Grandma, as if you could put a price on the only person in this family who ever saw me clearly. My mother's expression hardened. Your grandmother spoiled you. She always favored you. It wasn't fair. Favoritism is not the same as love, I said. And love is not the same as obligation. I have paid what I owed. I no longer owe anything. Derek stepped forward. She owes us, he said, and the words landed exactly as they had in the video, exactly as they had in the 47 seconds I had watched a dozen times. After everything we did for you growing up, we put a roof over your head, we fed you, we sent you to college, you owe us for that. I looked at him. I looked at his face, at the lines around his mouth that had come from years of smugness, at the way his jaw was set in the certainty of his own entitlement. I did not raise my voice. I did not shake. I set the folder down on the dining table and opened it to the page with the lease's non-payment clause. I am not here to argue about what I owe, I said. I am here to inform you that the non-payment notice has been served. Michael Chen, my attorney, has filed the paperwork with the county. You have 23 days remaining before the eviction is processed. You can either vacate the property voluntarily by the end of the month, or I will have the sheriff remove you. You can't do this, my mother said. Her voice was rising now, the controls slipping. We have nowhere to go. The children are in school. Derek's job is 15 minutes away. You can't just throw us out. I can, I said, and I will unless you choose to negotiate. Nego, what do you want? My father asked. His voice was small, fragile. I want nothing you can afford to give, I said, and then I closed the folder, picked it up, and walked toward the front door. I did not look back. I heard my mother's voice behind me, sharp and desperate. Claire, Claire, you cannot just leave. This is not over. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I turned my head just enough to see her in my peripheral vision. It is not over, I said, but it has begun. I walked out the door. I walked down the listing steps. I got into my car and I drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. The gray sky had not changed. The city looked the same. But something inside me had shifted, a tectonic plate sliding into a new position, and I knew that nothing would ever return to the way it had been. I drove directly to Michael Chen's office. He was waiting for me, a folder of his own on the desk, his tie perfectly knotted, his expression unreadable. I sat down and placed my folder next to his. They know, I said, and I served them the non-payment notice verbally. They have 23 days. He nodded. I filed the official notice with the county this morning. It will be delivered by certified mail tomorrow. They will have no legal grounds to contest it. There's one more thing, I said. I need you to contact the family's attorney, the one who sent me the certified check 3 years ago. I want to know who hired him and what the terms of the estate settlement were. Michael raised an eyebrow. You think they manipulated the inheritance? I think they offered me $86,400 to sign away my interest in my grandmother's estate, and that number exactly matches what I spent on their rent. I think that is not a coincidence. I want the full accounting. He picked up his phone and began dialing. I'll make some calls. I left his office at 4 in the afternoon. I drove home through the early evening traffic, the city lights beginning to flicker on, the sky turning a deep bruised purple. I parked in my garage and rode the elevator up to my floor. I unlocked my door and stepped into the quiet of my own space, the clean lines, the single orchid, the rectangle of light that had fallen across my desk every morning for the past 3 years. I set the folder on my desk. I did not open it. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water and stood at the window and looked out at the skyline. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. It was a message from the family group chat. A photo. I opened it. It was a picture taken in the living room I had just left. My mother was holding up a glass of white wine. My father was sitting on the couch, his arm around her shoulders, a forced smile on his face. Derek was standing behind them, both thumbs up, his grin wide and confident. The caption read, "She'll come crawling back, she always does." I did not smile. I did not frown. I set the phone down on the counter, face up, and I watched the photo bright in the dark glass of my kitchen window. They were celebrating. They were toasting. They were certain that I would break, that I would cave, that I would call tomorrow and apologize and transfer the money and return to my role as the invisible provider, the grateful daughter, the sister who owed them. They thought they had won. They thought this was the end of the story. But they had only just begun to understand who they were dealing with. The evidence arrived on a Thursday afternoon, delivered not by mail but by Michael Chen himself, standing at my front door with a leather satchel and an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was not anger. It was not pity. It was something closer to cold satisfaction, the look of a man who had found exactly what he had been searching for and was already calculating the consequences. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, which told me everything I needed to know about the weight of what he carried. I led him to my home office, where the single orchid sat in its pot on the corner of the filing cabinet, still white, still alive, a silent witness to every decision I had made in this room. Michael set the satchel on my desk, unlatched it, and pulled out a stack of documents nearly 2 inches thick. He placed them in a neat pile and then set his hand on top of them, as if he was steadying himself before a difficult delivery. "Tell me," I said. "Your family's attorney is a man named Robert Stanton," he said. "He operates out of a storefront office in the same strip mall where Derek works. He is not a real estate specialist. He is a general practice attorney who handles wills, divorces, and the occasional traffic ticket. Your mother hired him to manage the estate settlement after your grandmother passed away." "I remember," I said. "She told me she wanted someone local, someone she could trust." "She trusted the wrong person," Michael said. "Or she trusted exactly the right person for what she wanted to accomplish. Stanton prepared the offer to buy out your interest in the estate. That certified check for $86,400 was his idea. But that is not the worst of it." He lifted his hand from the stack of documents and began to separate them into 3 piles. The first pile was thin, only a few pages. The second was thicker. The third was the thickest of all. "The first pile," he said, "contains the original estate accounting. Your grandmother's estate was valued at approximately $240,000. Half of that was the house she lived in, which was sold at market rate. The other half was cash, investments, and personal property. According to the terms of her will, you were entitled to 60% of the liquid assets. Derek was entitled to 40%. Patricia was not included as a beneficiary, which is why she contested the will. She never told me she contested it. Of course not. She did it quietly through Stanton. She argued that your grandmother was not of sound mind when she wrote the will, and that the assets should be divided equally among all 3 children. She was your grandmother's daughter-in-law, not a blood heir, but she claimed that your grandmother had promised her a share. Stanton filed the challenge, and the estate was frozen for almost 2 years. I remembered those 2 years. I remembered the phone calls, the legal fees, the uncertainty. I remembered my mother telling me that the probate process was slow, that these things took time, that I should be patient. I had been patient. I had waited. And when the estate finally settled, I received a single payment of $86,400, which was exactly the amount they had calculated to buy me off. "The second pile," Michael continued, "contains the documents Stanton filed with the court. Included in these filings is a power of attorney form bearing your signature, dated 3 years before the estate settlement. The document grants your mother the authority to manage your financial affairs, including the authority to settle claims against the estate on your behalf. I never signed a power of attorney. I know. I had a forensic document examiner review the signature. It is a forgery. A competent forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. The examiner identified 3 inconsistencies in the letter formations. Your mother used this forged document to authorize Stanton to accept the settlement on your behalf and to release any further claims against the estate. I looked at the document. I saw my name at the bottom, written in a hand that looked almost like mine, but not quite. The loop of the C was too wide. The tail of the E was too short. It was close enough to pass casual inspection, but wrong in the ways that mattered, wrong in the ways that only I would notice. "The third pile," Michael said, and his voice dropped, "contains the records of a home equity line of credit application filed against the property on Sycamore Drive. The application was submitted 6 months ago in the name of Harrison Properties LLC, with you listed as the sole member. The application requested a line of credit in the amount of $110,000. The The signature on the application is also a forgery. The same document examiner confirmed it. I felt the cold bloom of understanding expand in my chest. They tried to borrow against a property they didn't own. They tried to borrow against a property they didn't know you owned. The application was denied because the title search revealed that the property was held by a different entity than the one listed on the application. But the attempt itself constitutes fraud, identity theft, forgery of a financial instrument. Your mother and Derek are both named on the application as co-borrowers. How did you get these documents? I called Stanton's office under the pretense of a routine estate audit. He sent me the files without question. He did not know I was working for you. He assumed I was a third-party administrator conducting a post-settlement review. The documents are authentic. The forgeries are documented. The chain of custody is clear. I sat down in the chair behind my desk. I looked at the three piles, at the evidence of a betrayal that went far deeper than a 47-second video. They had not only mocked me, they had stolen from me, they had forged my name, they had attempted to use my property as collateral for a loan they never intended to repay. They had treated my identity as a resource to be exploited, exactly as they had treated my bank account. What are the legal options? I asked. Several, Michael said. You can file a criminal complaint for identity theft and forgery. You can pursue a civil suit for damages. You can report Stanton to the State Bar Association for his role in the scheme, and you can use the forged documents as leverage in the eviction proceedings. If they want to avoid criminal charges, they will have to agree to your terms. What terms? That is entirely up to you. I looked at the documents. I looked at my signature, forged on two separate occasions, used to steal my inheritance and to attempt to steal my property. I thought about the video, about Derek's smile, about my mother's nod, about my father's silence. I thought about the certified check for $86,400, the mirror value of my own generosity, offered to me as a bribe to walk away from everything my grandmother had left me. I want to think about it, I said. Take your time, Michael said, but not too much. The eviction timeline is fixed, and the longer we wait, the more opportunity they have to destroy evidence. I understand. He stood and gathered his satchel. Call me when you are ready. After he left, I sat in my office and stared at the piles of paper. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the desk. The orchid caught the last of the light and glowed white against the darkening room. I did not move for a long time. I simply sat and let the weight of what I had learned settle into my bones. My phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was a text from my mother. Claire, we need to talk. Your father is very upset. He says you threatened us. I told him you didn't mean it. Call me so we can sort this out like adults. I did not reply. I set the phone face down on the desk and watched the room grow dark. 30 minutes later, another message, this time from Derek. Mom says you're being ridiculous. You can't evict us. You don't have the guts. You've always been weak. You'll cave like you always do. I did not reply. I let the messages accumulate. 20 minutes later, another from my mother. Don't know what Laura told you, but she's lying. She's always been jealous of this family. Don't let her turn you against us. I picked up the phone. I typed a single response. I need some time to think. I'll call you tomorrow. I sent it. I watched the three dots appear as my mother began to type a reply. I did not read it. I locked my phone and placed it in the drawer of my desk. The false submission was a delicate art, a performance of weakness so convincing that they would believe they had already won. I had learned long ago that the most dangerous person in any negotiation is the one who appears defeated. They would savor their victory. They would grow bolder. They would say things they never would have said if they thought I was still a threat. The next morning, I woke to a flood of messages. The family group chat had exploded overnight. My mother had posted a long paragraph about how disappointed she was in me, how she had raised me better, how family was supposed to forgive and forget. Derek had posted a laughing emoji and a comment about how I was probably crying in my fancy condo. My father had posted nothing. Laura had posted a single message. Claire, call me when you get a chance. I saved screenshots of every message and filed them in the digital folder. I called Laura at 9 in the morning. She answered on the first ring. Claire, she said. Her voice was low, careful. Michael told me about the documents. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said. I need your help. Anything? I need you to help me organize the evidence. Physical copies, digital backups, chain of custody logs. I want everything cataloged and notarized. I can do that. I can come over today. I'll be here. Laura arrived at 11 with her own satchel, filled with the tools of her trade, notary stamps, file folders, manila envelopes, a label maker, a spiral notebook for logs. She was wearing a plain gray sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, and she looked nothing like the ditzy gossip the family had dismissed her as. She looked focused. She looked competent. She looked like the ally I had always needed but never known I had. We worked through the afternoon. We sorted the documents into categories: estate fraud, property fraud, identity theft, communication records, financial transactions. Laura created a numbering system, and logged every document on a spreadsheet. She flagged each page with a sticky note indicating its evidentiary relevance. She prepared a master index that cross referenced every piece of evidence with the legal claim it supported. This is solid, she said, holding up the forged power of attorney. The forensic examiner's report is credible. The inconsistencies in the signature are documented. If this goes to court, your mother will have to explain why she submitted a document she knew was forged. She'll say I signed it and forgot. She'll have to say that under oath. And the examiner will testify that the signature is not yours. Perjury is a felony. I watched her work. She moved through the documents with the precision of someone who had done this 100 times. She knew the forms, she knew the procedures, she knew exactly how to build a case that would survive scrutiny. She owes us, Derek had said, but the debt was not mine to pay, it was theirs, and I had just finished calculating the interest. That evening after Laura left, I received a phone call from my father. I almost did not answer, but I wanted to hear his voice to see how deep the rot went. Claire, he said, his voice was tired, the voice of a man who had been worn down by years of standing in doorways. I need to talk to you. I'm listening. Your mother is beside herself. She can't eat. She can't sleep. She thinks you're going to throw us out on the street. She is not wrong. Listen to me. I know things have been hard. I know we haven't always treated you the way we should, but you can't do this. You can't just cut us off. We're family. You stood in the doorway of the kitchen while Derek called me a loser and Mom nodded along. You said nothing. You never say anything. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background, some news program, the steady murmur of a world that did not care about our conversation. Your mother means well, he said. She means exactly what she says. And what she says is that I am a source of money and convenience, not a daughter. That's not true, isn't it? Another silence. I let it stretch. I let him feel the weight of everything he had never said, everything he had never done. She forged my signature on a power of attorney, I said. She tried to take out a loan against property she didn't own using my name. She offered me $86,400 to walk away from Grandma's estate, and she used money she had siphoned from that same estate to do it. Tell me again that she means well. He did not respond. I heard the television go silent as if he had turned it off. I heard him exhale, long and slow. I didn't know, he said. Now you do. Claire, please don't do this. We have nowhere to go. You have 20 days. I ended the call. I did not feel guilt. I felt the clean, cold satisfaction of a truth finally spoken. The next 2 days were a masterclass in patience. I did not call them. I did not text. I let them stew in their own panic. The messages grew more desperate, more angry, more revealing. Derek sent a voice message in which he called me a selfish bitch and said that I had always been jealous of him because he was the favorite. I saved it. My mother sent a series of messages that alternated between guilt trips and outright demands. How can you do this to your own mother? Followed by, you need to transfer the money now. I saved them all. My father sent nothing. I did not expect him to. On the third day, Laura and I met at her apartment to organize the final batch of evidence. Her living room was small and tidy, with a folding table set up in the center of the room, covered in file folders and labeling supplies. She had printed out the tracking logs, the notary certificates, the index sheets. She had prepared 3 complete sets of evidence, one for me, one for Michael Chen, and one to be filed with the court. I want you to see something, she said, pulling a document from a folder. It was a bank statement from an account I did not recognize. This is the account your mother used to pay Robert Stanton. It was opened 6 months before your grandmother died. She funded it with small deposits from the joint account she shared with your father, but the majority of the deposits came from your grandmother's account before the estate was frozen. She was taking money from Grandma before she died. $11,000 over the course of 4 months. Small enough to avoid triggering fraud alerts, but consistent enough to be noticeable in retrospect. She was preparing for the legal battle she knew was coming. I looked at the statement. The deposits were regular, almost clinical, as if my mother had treated my grandmother's account as an extension of her own. She had planned this. She had prepared for it. She had been building a case against me before I even knew there was a war. She owes us, Derek had said. But the only debt that existed was the one they had created, the one they had tried to collect through forgery and theft and the systematic dismantling of my place in the family. I closed the folder. I looked at Laura, who was watching me with the steady gaze of someone who had seen the worst and was ready to face whatever came next. Thank you, I said. You don't have to thank me. They underestimated me for 30 years. I'm enjoying this more than I should. That night, I stood on the balcony of my apartment and looked out at the city lights. The air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of rain from a storm that had passed through earlier in the evening. I thought about my grandmother, about the way she had looked at me the last time I saw her, about the way she had squeezed my hand and said, Accountancy is thicker than blood. She had known. She had seen the machinery of their love, the way it operated on numbers and obligations, and the quiet expectation that I would always be the one to pay. I thought about the house on Sycamore Drive, about the cracked steps and the peeling paint and the ceiling fan with the broken pull chain. I thought about my mother arranging throw pillows in a living room she did not own. I thought about Derek grinning into a camera while his children slept in a house I had financed. I thought about the folders on my desk, the evidence of a crime they had committed against me, the proof of a debt they could never repay. I did not sleep much that night. I lay in the dark and let the plan crystallize in my mind. Every detail was in place: the lease, the deed, the forged documents, the bank statements, the video, the certified check, the communication logs. The evidence was a fortress, and I held the keys. The next morning, I woke to a text from my mother. "We are having a family dinner tonight. You should come. We can talk about this like civilized people." I read the message 3 times. Civilized people, as if they had ever been civilized. As if the dinner table had ever been a place of peace instead of a battlefield where I was always the enemy. I typed my response: "I will be there at 6." I locked my phone and looked at the folders stacked on my desk. They wanted to talk. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to convince me that I was wrong, that I was cruel, that I was the one destroying the family. They had no idea what I was bringing with me. I arrived at the house on Sycamore Drive at 6 minutes to 6. The sky had turned a deep slate gray, heavy with clouds that threatened rain but had not yet delivered. I parked at the curb behind Derek's pickup truck, a vehicle I had helped him finance 3 years ago with a loan I had co-signed and then quietly paid off when he fell behind. He did not know that. He never knew the half of what I had done for him. I wore the same uniform I had worn to the first meeting: the white silk blouse, the tailored navy blazer, the black trousers, the small gold stud earrings. My hair was pulled back in a sleek low ponytail. My lipstick was bold cherry red, the exact shade I had worn the day I watched the video for the first time. It had become my armor, a color that said I was present, I was composed, I was not afraid. I carried a leather portfolio bag instead of a folder, large enough to hold the full set of documents Laura and I had prepared. The weight of it felt good in my hand, solid and real. I walked up the listing front steps and knocked on the door instead of letting myself in. I wanted them to open the door for me. I wanted them to see me arrive as a guest, as someone who had to be admitted, because the moment I stepped inside, the terms of entry would change. Derek opened the door. He was wearing a polo shirt tucked into jeans, his version of formal, and he had the smirk on his face that I had seen in the video, the one that said he was in control, the one that said he had already won. Behind him, I could see the living room arranged for a dinner party, the beige couch cleared of clutter, the coffee table set with a tray of appetizers, the dining table visible through the archway, set with plates and glasses and a centerpiece of artificial flowers. "Claire," he said, drawing out the name. "Glad you could make it. We were starting to think you'd changed your mind." I said I would be here, and here you are. He stepped back and swept his arm in an exaggerated gesture of welcome. "Come in." "Everyone's waiting." I stepped inside. The smell of vanilla and cinnamon hit me immediately, my mother's signature scent, the same candle she had burned in every house she had ever lived in. The television was off. The ceiling fan with the broken pull chain spun slowly, uselessly. I could hear voices from the kitchen, my mother's high and bright, my father's low and murmured, and another voice I did not recognize. Derek led me into the living room. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her silver hair perfectly curled, her blouse a pale pink that was meant to communicate warmth and approachability. She was smiling, but the smile did not reach her eyes. It never did. "Claire," she said, and she crossed the room to embrace me. I allowed it. I stood still while her arms wrapped around me, while she pressed her cheek to mine, while she murmured in my ear, "I'm so glad you came. We can fix this." I did not return the embrace. I stepped back and looked at her. "Where is Dad?" "He's in the kitchen with your Uncle Richard. He drove up from the valley to join us. I thought it would be nice to have a neutral party." Uncle Richard. My mother's brother, a man I had seen maybe 6 times in the past decade. He was a retired accountant who lived in a gated community 3 hours away, and he had never once called me on my birthday. He was not neutral. He was a witness, someone my mother had brought in to pressure me, to shame me into compliance. "Lovely," I said. My father appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, his face already flushed with the first drink of the evening. He looked at me with an expression I could not read, something between guilt and hope, and he said, "Claire, I'm glad you came." I said I would. Uncle Richard emerged behind him, a tall man with a gray beard and a sweater vest that strained across his stomach. He smiled at me with the practiced cordiality of a man who had been briefed on his role. "Claire, good to see you. You look well." "Thank you." We stood in the living room, a tableau of forced conviviality. My mother gestured to the couch. Sit, sit, let me get you something to drink. We have wine or I can make you tea. Water is fine. My mother's smile flickered, but she recovered quickly. She disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a glass of ice water, which she handed to me with both hands, as if she was offering a peace treaty. Took it, I set it on the coffee table. I did not drink. Derek sat in the armchair across from me, his legs crossed, his arms folded, his smirk firmly in place. My father sat on the edge of the couch, his drink cradled in his hands. Uncle Richard took the other end of the couch, his eyes moving between me and my mother, waiting for the performance to begin. So, my mother said, settling onto the couch beside my father. Let's talk about the rent. I said nothing. I let the silence stretch. There seems to have been a misunderstanding, she continued. The payment didn't go through, and we got a notice from the landlord, but I'm sure we can sort it out. You've always been so good about helping us. I don't know what happened this time. There was no misunderstanding, I said. I did not pay the rent because I am the landlord. I explained this last time. My mother's smile tightened. Claire, that's not helpful. We all know that's not true. You're a property manager, not an owner. I am both, I said. I have been the owner of this property for 3 years. I hold the deed. I hold the master lease. I have been the landlord of this house since the day you moved in. Uncle Richard cleared his throat. Claire, I've reviewed the property records. The owner of record is Harrison Properties LLC, a corporate entity. There is no individual listed as the owner. Harrison Properties LLC is a holding company I registered in the county 3 years ago. I am the sole member. I hold 100% of the ownership interest. The corporate veil is transparent to anyone who knows where to look. My mother's smile had disappeared entirely. That's not possible, you would have told us. I told you exactly what you needed to know. You never asked who owned the company. You never asked where the money came from. You simply assumed it was free. Derek uncrossed his legs and leaned forward. This is ridiculous. You're trying to scare us. You can't evict your own family. I can, I said. And I have. The non-payment notice has been filed. You have 17 days remaining. My mother's voice rose. You can't do this. What will people think? Your own mother thrown out on the street? Your brother with 2 children? Your father who has a heart condition? I know about the heart condition, I said. I paid for his cardiologist appointments. I paid for his medication. I have been paying for this family's survival for 3 years, and you have been mocking me for it. Uncle Richard looked at my mother. Patricia, what is she talking about? My mother waved her hand dismissively. She's exaggerating. She's always been dramatic. I opened my portfolio bag. I pulled out the first document, the certified check for $86,400, the one they had sent me to buy off my inheritance. I held it up so that everyone in the room could see it. Do you recognize this? I asked. My mother's face went pale. Where did you get that? You sent it to me. A certified check from Robert Stanton, your attorney, offering me $86,400 to sign over my interest in grandmother's estate. Do you know what that number matches exactly? No one answered. It matches the exact amount I paid in rent for this house over 3 years. $2,400 per month, 36 months, $86,400. You offered me the exact amount I had already spent on you, as if you were paying me back for my own generosity. My mother's mouth opened and closed. Derek's smirk had vanished. My father stared at the check as if it was a ghost. They would have given you a room, a place to live, but you wanted her gone, out of the house, out of the will, out of the family. That's not true, my mother said, but her voice was thin, unconvincing. I pulled out the second document, the forged power of attorney. I held it up. Do you recognize this? My mother's face went from pale to gray. I've never seen that before. It bears your signature as witness, and it bears my signature, which a forensic document examiner has confirmed is a forgery. You used this document to authorize Robert Stanton to accept the settlement on my behalf. You stole my inheritance. Uncle Richard leaned forward, squinting at the document. Patricia, is this true? My mother stood up. Her hands were shaking. She's lying. She's trying to destroy this family. I pulled out the third document, the home equity line of credit application. And this, I said, is an application for a $100,000 line of credit against this property, filed in my name with my forged signature, listing you and Derek as co-borrowers. You tried to borrow against a property you did not own, using an identity you had stolen. Derek stood up, his face red. That was Mom's idea. I didn't know anything about it. Shut up, Derek, my mother snapped. You involved him, I said. He is named on the application as a co-borrower. He is complicit. My father set down his drink. His voice was low and rough. Patricia, tell me she's lying. My mother did not answer. She stood in the center of the living room, her hands clenched at her sides, her face a mask of fury and fear. I stood up. I placed the documents back in my portfolio bag and closed it. I am not here to negotiate, I said. I am here to inform you that the eviction will proceed as scheduled. I have filed a complaint with the County District Attorney's Office regarding the forgeries. Robert Stanton will be contacted by the State Bar Association. You have 17 days to vacate this property, and you have the rest of your lives to think about what you have done. I turned toward the door. Claire, wait, my father said. I stopped. I looked back at him. He was standing now, his hands shaking, tears in his eyes. I didn't know, he said. I swear to you I didn't know any of this. I believe you, I said, but you have spent your entire life standing in doorways, refusing to walk through them. You enabled her. You let her destroy your relationship with your daughter. You let her forge documents and steal money and treat me like a servant. You may not have known the specifics, but you knew enough, and you said nothing. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. I turned back to the door. I walked out into the evening air, which had finally begun to rain, a soft, steady drizzle that cooled my face. I walked down the listing steps to my car. I opened the door and sat in the driver's seat and let the rain patter against the windshield. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, a message from Laura. Did it work? I typed back. The trap is closed. She replied with a single word, good. I drove home through the rain, the city lights smearing across the wet glass, the evidence of everything I had built and everything I had destroyed sitting in the portfolio bag on the passenger seat. The fallout came quickly. Within 48 hours, the county district attorney's office opened an investigation into the forgeries. Robert Stanton surrendered his law license pending the outcome of the Bar Association review. The bank that had received the fraudulent line of credit application filed a report with the Financial Crimes Unit. My mother and Derek were contacted by a detective who requested they come in for an interview. I did not attend the interview. I provided my evidence through Michael Chen, who presented it in a clean, organized format that left no room for ambiguity. The forensic document examiner's report was appended. The bank statements were included. The certified check was photographed and cataloged. The video was transcribed and time-stamped. The family's attorney, a new one hired by Uncle Richard in a desperate attempt to contain the damage, contacted Michael Chen and offered a settlement. The terms were simple. The family would vacate the property within 30 days, they would sign a release of all claims against the estate, and they would pay restitution in the amount of $86,400, the exact amount I had spent on their rent. I accepted the settlement. I did not want the money, but I wanted them to feel the weight of what they had taken from me. I donated the entire sum to a domestic violence shelter in my grandmother's name. My mother called me twice in the week after the interview. I did not answer. She left voicemails that alternated between rage and pleading, between accusations and apologies. She said I had destroyed the family. She said she had only done what she thought was best. She said she forgave me for what I had done. I deleted each message without responding. Derek sent a long text message that was half apology and half excuse. He said he had been pressured by our mother. He said he had never meant for things to go this far. He said he hoped we could still be siblings. I did not reply. My father called once. I answered. Claire, he said. His voice was hoarse, broken. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have protected you. I should have stopped her. I failed you. Yes, I said. You did. Is there any way to fix this? I don't know, I said, but it starts with you not standing in doorways anymore. I ended the call. I did not cry. I did not feel relief. I felt the quiet finality of a door that had been closed, not slammed, but sealed with the knowledge that I had done what I needed to do. The epilogue begins 6 months later, on a balcony overlooking the city, on a cool spring evening when the sky is the color of a bruise, and the lights of the skyline are beginning to blink on one by one. I live in a penthouse now, a new purchase, a floor-to-ceiling glass wall that looks out over the river and the bridges, and the endless motion of a city that does not care about any single person's story. I bought it with the money I had saved by not paying their rent, by not financing their lives, by not subsidizing their contempt. I am sitting in a chair on the balcony, a cup of tea cooling in my hands, the steam rising and disappearing into the twilight. The orchid is on the windowsill behind me, still alive, still white. The framed holiday photo of the family in the living room of the house on Sycamore Drive hangs on the wall in my home office, but I have turned it to face the wall. I do not need to see their faces to remember what they taught me. If you are listening to this, if you have stayed with me through every word, I want you to understand something. This story is not about revenge. It is not about punishment. It is about the moment when you stop paying the price for other people's comfort and start investing in your own peace. I have learned 5 truths that I carry with me every day, and I want to share them with you, not as advice, but as evidence of what I have survived. The first truth is that generosity without boundaries is not kindness. It is self-abandonment. I gave and gave and gave because I believed that my love could be measured in dollars and that my worth could be proven by my utility. But love is not a transaction. And when you give without limits, you teach people that your limits do not exist. The second truth is that in a narcissistic family system, your value is measured by what you provide, not by who you are. I was the invisible savior, the one who paid the bills and received nothing but silence in return. They did not see me, they saw a resource. And the moment I stopped being useful, I became a target. The third truth is that the only leverage you hold is what they desperately need, and you can withdraw. I had been paying for their home, their security, their comfort. And when I stopped, everything they had built on my foundation collapsed. It was not cruelty, it was consequence. The fourth truth is that protecting your peace is not selfish. It is strategic survival. I spent years believing that I had to absorb their chaos, that I had to be the bigger person, that I had to forgive and forget. But forgiveness without accountability is just permission to be hurt again. I learned that I could love them from a distance and still love myself more. The fifth truth is that when you stop paying the price for their comfort, they will finally see your true worth, but it will cost them everything they took for granted. They will call you cruel. They will call you selfish. They will tell you that you have destroyed the family. But the family was already destroyed. You were just the last one holding it together. I do not hate my family. I do not wish them ill. But I do not owe them my silence, my money, or my presence. I owe them nothing. And neither do you. If this story has meant anything to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what you are walking away from. I want to know that you are out there, that you are surviving, that you are choosing yourself. I am Claire Harrison, and I am finally free. The rain has stopped. The skyline is sharp against the deepening blue. I lift my tea and take a sip, and I smile, a small and private smile, because the woman who sat in that office 3 years ago, watching a video of her family calling her a loser, is gone. She is not dead, she is not destroyed, she is simply no longer the one who pays. I set down the cup, I look out at the lights. The air is clean and cool and smells of rain and distant soil. Keep your boundaries strong. Guard your peace, and I will see you in the next.